My name is Juha Berghel, and I'm a CEO and one of the founders at ONEiO. I'm an integration service provider company, and I will be your host today. Topic of the day is integration outsourcing, which we know can be a complex process, but there are a few things you can do to make it easier. So in this 30-minute approximately webinar, you will learn how to outsource integrations like an expert. We will also explore some common pitfalls and how to avoid them. So that you can have new ideas on how to approach your next integration project and integration outsourcing in general. I'm super thrilled to have Jill Chang, an enterprise integration advisor, as the presenter for the topic. Jill has over 20 years of experience in large, complex, enterprise-wide integration programs driven by digital transformation, merger acquisitions. She also has an extensive experience working with organizations that need to change integrations from a roadblocker to an enabler. She also helps executives initiate digital transformation programs or fix struggling digital initiatives. So Jill, welcome, and please, floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thanks you for the introduction and also inviting me to talk about this topic. So I'm Jill, and I'm an enterprise integration advisor, and also I have a significant background in enterprise architectures. And I think for today's topic, I think we talk a lot about outsourcing. We talk about a lot about the integration, but probably not so much about how we outsource integration. And I think it's quite a niche area. And then I would like just to share probably a few personal experience and also the common struggle that I see in most of the organizations when they outsource their integrations. So yes, I think let's get to it. So first, I wanted to just simply say, hey, what is integration? I think integration means so many different things to different people based on what role and where you involve in that integration. And it could be a technical sort of level, or it could be at the business level, how you integrate business. Basically, I would say almost every business is an integration business. And then today I wanted to talk about how we outsource integrations, and I wanted to also sort of elevate that level. It's not just at the technical level we are outsourcing. We also need to sort of have that big context understanding. Okay, what does that mean? I mean, from the business perspective. So I wanted to give an example in terms of how we are outsourcing the integrations, and then I think usually the first step important is to determine what to outsource, and the integration is always a sort of it's no clear boundary because it's always probably involved 2 or 3 or 10, 20 different applications. And so it's always a bit more complex in how we determine what to outsource and then which bit we can outsource. And I think this slide is not technical, and we're just looking at these metrics. So from these metrics, you can see the left-hand side, I mean, it's talking about the technical difficulty from the top to the bottom. And then on the business value side, from the left to right, you can see the business value from the low to high. And I want to use this metric to show when we determine the outsource, where to outsource, we can simply, sort of divide it into 4 areas. Like the top right corner, you can see that's a core. And then you have the generic, you have the supporting, which is enabling that your cores. And then also you have the generic supporting area. That means usually it's probably sort of a low in terms of business value, more low value, and also technical difficulty means it's more simple. And to give an example, for example, running the finance. I mean, a finance for any other company, a manufacturing company, it probably can be just their generic support back office function. But for the bank, for financial services, it's different. It's their cores. So when you decide what to outsource, I think usually core represent that's usually more, that's where your business competitiveness is also, or where you differentiate your business to others. And they also, that's probably more complex, more challenge to outsource, or there's something that you need to keep in-house. And then something that's probably more generic, or I think simple, like commodity services. Sometimes I think it's almost like a no-brainer that probably is easy to outsource to someone else because it could be cheaper, and then also they probably can do it much better than we do it in-house by ourselves. So let's just look at the example here. What do I mean? For example, car maker. So we talk about car, for example, Honda, BMW, whatever brands they do. I'm sure they probably don't produce every part themselves, and they have their core, they have their non-core. Sometimes they will use a part purchase from others and then assemble it themselves. And then if their core, if their selling point is they have a very strong powers of engine, then they will probably keep that in-house. So this is what do I mean by core and also non-cores. And also for any business, like when I say every business is an integration business, sometimes it's how you're going to put everything together to run your business, whether it's back office or your core. So at all different levels, it's every business is an integration business. And so when outsourcing the integration, I think there are probably, yes, lots of reasons for outsourcing integrations, saving time. I mean, of course, it's going to be more cost effective. And also you can focus on your core competency. But how we can do it, I mean, which is effective and also to minimize the risk. And then is that easy? Because we know that usually people are a bit suspicious. Probably suspicious about, okay, it's never that simple and straightforward when you want to outsource the integrations. So first, let's just look at the typical outsourcing models. I think you can look at these 4 layers. Usually it's same as any other outsourcing model, like when you're outsourcing your IT. If you look at the solution, you look at your ERP or supply chain or whatever, or whatever a technology platform. So you can outsource whether at the platform level, for example, your hosting or your call center, your data center, and or your operational support, or also it could be you're outsourcing your development to a third party, or sometimes you have a third party that's going to do end-to-end, cover everything from the support, from the development to the hosting. These are the typical outsourcing models. But for integration, I think it's specific, unique, is because usually it's not easy to draw the boundaries. And also it's really not easy to capture all the requirements and give it every specific details, how you're going to integrate. So it's like you have this driverless cars, and then whether you can just sort of delegate and then let them to drive, and then you can sort of sit back and relax. And I think for integration, certainly it's not the case, because I think it's very important to give us still the instructions. For example, that when you want to maybe activate the driverless card, and you will say, okay, I want to take the shortest route to get to the destination, or whether I want to take the most beautiful route to the destination so I can enjoy the view on the way. Or sometimes maybe there is a specific situation that you just wanted to instruct your the AI or driverless car, say, hey, I want to be at the destination as probably slowest as possible, because I have this beautiful girl in my car, which I want to spend as much time as I could. So sometimes there's a very unique, specific situation. You will give them the different instructions. And then which is the same for integration. I think sometimes like not all the integrations are the same. For integration for each of the business, they certainly have different business drivers, different business objectives, and these need to be taken into consideration. And so that's extra consideration factor that what we should look into when we are outsourcing the integrations. So let's look at this second step. After determining what's important to integrate or to outsource your integration. And then the second is, okay, it's important to framing your integration context, because that's very important. That help you, your supplier, to know like exactly what's exactly the results, what you wanted to get to, and what's really important to your business. And so that can help them to plan or thinking how to implement, how to deliver that to meet your objectives. And then so basically there's two parts. I would say is looking at from the top down, top level, like what's your business objective, what's your business driver, because every business, they usually go into integrations, probably it's because they wanted to automate certain things or they want to cut down costs. So that's sort of a top level view. And then also the integration characteristics, what's from the bottom up view, like what sort of integration will be right to outsource or to integrate that will be help to meeting that business objective and in finding that right match to enable that. So let's look at the business motivations. This is the top view. Let's look at usually the common business motivation that we wanted to outsource integration. So usually you can pick from one of these. I think there are probably a few others, but I think you get ideas. So usually they probably include cost reduction, focus on the core competency or building your core capability, and also improving efficiency or accelerate the time to market, or you wanted to be able to scale to grow in a short time frame. And then so for the integration implementation, what does that mean for integration? So for integrations, when it's coming to implementation, that usually it means probably we wanted to standardize the technology when we want to reduce the cost. For example, maybe you have so many different technology and so many different ways to integrate, or you find out, okay, to manually building a lot of integration is not very cost effective. So you want to leverage the Apas tool to do the integration. And also outsourcing your non-core, you probably realize your currently this is not the way where the area you're doing your integration is not your core area. This could be, for example, your back office functions, your non-core business that you can outsource and then delegate to a third party. And the third is improve efficiency. So for example, automate the workflows and reduce the manual process. So these are usually where the integration also can help to improve the efficiency. And the fourth, accelerate the time to market. So you probably, when you're launching a new product, and you need to quickly, have a team be able to build a product and deliver. And you probably don't have that in-house resource really available. It's easier, quicker to leverage a third-party resource that's really available. And also scalability, I think, is how you're going to be able to expand and grow. And I think for integration, usually we're talking about the possible way is how you're going to modularize or componentize these services so they are reusable, you can redeploy, and it's easy to scale as well. So these are usually the very top in terms of when we talk about business motivations and also how we're going to implement it from the integration point of view, how we are achieving these business objectives. And if we're looking at the also integration itself, because it's integration they have all these characteristics, like, for example, on the left-hand side, stability. Is this integration area stable, or it's constantly evolving? And what do I mean by this is, if this area that you're gonna to change very often, because usually it's easy to standardize the area where it's stable. But if it's an area that's constantly evolving, then you need to be mindful about, okay, the effort that how much you're going to invest in that area, or whether that's going to be your priority to integrate in that areas. So I think sometimes it's having this understanding of the different characteristics that's for that specific integrations that can help you to understanding, okay, which one is easier, or right candidate, right fits, that can help you to, to meet your business objectives. And then, so the next one, like technical complexity, is it low or is high? Is it going to be quickly delivered, or is going to be very complex? And then when we map into that business value, for example, it's a low value, high value area. So you can see, okay, is that worth to implement something that's very complex, but has a very low business value? And then the third, like, for example, business criticality, for example, integration. You have those different levels. Is that the integration supporting your administrational back office or level, or operational level, or business, or whether it's really your core business? Given the examples, like when we're building the integrations, you could have interface or integration to monitor your system, or just try to scan or send a notification to notify your staff when something that's probably system goes down, then they can get a notification immediately. So these are sort of a administrational or operational level of integrations, and sometimes, for example, business critical, you have an interface that's going to, for example, make a payment or handle the transaction, or place a customer's process a customer's orders. So there's a different level of business criticality for each of the integration. And this one, I think, be able to go through like the list on the left that give you ideas how you can score this integration based on their characteristics, and help you to find the right candidates, probably prioritize what to integrate. Because I would say integration is endless. You can always optimize, and then when you build a complexity to a certain level, you meet another layers that's different layers of complexity that you need to try to simplify or integrate. So yeah, integration it's a journey. It's never going to be an end. And yeah, so the rest I probably will not go through in each of them in very detail, but I think just want to give you an example on some of the indications and how you could sort of help you to rate and score your integration in each of the even at the sort of interface level, even or down to a more sort of a business area or specific process or whatever area that help you to determine that integration, whether it's easy to do or whether it's difficult to implement. Yeah. And okay. Actually, I think it's probably good also to mention, I think the last 2 or 3, I think the one like responsibility and also adoption. I think some integration, I think it's not just the technical, the integration itself. Sometimes it's also important to be aware of the culture and the organization and how they operate, how they interact with each other across the division. So, for example, the responsibility, you have this what called separate or shared. Whether sometimes some of the integration you can, it's only owned by specific division, but sometimes there's a cross shared ownership between the divisions. So sometimes keeping that in mind, in terms of the impact, the people who's going to involve in making that decision, or the dependency that it possibly has when we're going to implement that integration. And also for the adoption, is it something that's voluntary or mandated? For example, if the organization say, hey, from the top, is saying, we're going to standardize one particular process, or we're going to just standardize using one particular tool to do certain thing or to certain job. So usually we know that it's not voluntary. It's going to be executed. And usually these one, they are, because there's a support from the stakeholder, from the management team. So they are usually easier, and also the success rate are much higher. And but sometimes it's more experimental. Sometimes their interface that probably it's more a try and wrong, or they want to sort of socialize the idea, or sort of see, okay, let's see what the customer's feedback looks like. So let's see what the user's reaction or response to these ideas. So these voluntary adoption. So sometimes it's like, okay, how we're creating this interface and how we could create that integration experience that help to support or increase that adoption. So I think these are sort of a more culture or at organizational levels aspect in terms of how we are the sort of the risk and then that we're gonna to probably keeping in mind, and then how we are going to approach these integrations. So I wanted to just summarize these parts until here is how we could determine, yes, what to outsource in terms of integration, and how we can use the measured approach to determine what to integrate. And by combining the understanding that high-level view in terms of your business driver, and then also understanding the characteristics for each of the integration. So this helps to frame the context, and when helping supplier understanding your integration environment, I think it is very important that I think you don't need to have the technical skill or say, hey, how are we going to integrate at the technical level? And because that you can delegate to the third party, the suppliers. But I think framing that context, so ensure the supplier, they understand it when they're doing the integration, they have this context in mind. And also because this information, they probably don't have the access to this information. So that really relies on the company to be able to provide that picture and help their supplier to succeed in any of these outsourcing relationships. For any outsourcing relationship, I think what we often, another situation that we came across is sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. And because sometimes the supplier probably will say, hey, we use this integration approach, we're doing this way and for a certain company. But every company, they have a different size, different team, different IT maturity, and different engagement model. And of course, the integration landscape is completely different. I think it's hard to say, hey, you have exactly identical integration landscape between company A and company B. So I think framing that context is really, important for the company to be able to provide that information and help their supplier to deliver, and also build a trust relationship in long term. The third step, which is that I wanted to touch, is about how we're going to cultivate an effective engagement model. I think for the organizations, each of the integration team, they usually will need to interact with multiple platform, multiple teams, multiple parties. And then getting that integration requirements and from multiple source, multiple project, multiple programs, and how we make sure that communication, that engagement is efficient, is effective, and is clear. And I think having that engagement model planned it and also laid out, I think it's very important that you should think about it before you do the outsourcing. And I think usually every team, every IT team is structured differently. So it's never a one-size-fits-all. You have to consider your internal resource and your organizational operating model and what will work best for your organization, for your teams. And I think usually the challenge is try to find the balance and the right balance between agility and also the quality. So sometimes, for example, in these first diagrams that's here on the bottom left-hand side is a decentralized models. So sometimes when we could engage with the integration team, that's purely for a project that's probably engaged at the project or program level, and they have a sole ownership and sole responsibility, and usually the coordination, they try to achieve a goal that's usually more project specific. And then sometimes there's a hybrid model because they start to maybe the company grow and then they realize actually, running multiple projects probably share the similar technology and in the multiple different things, it's not very effective. So they will try to centralize some, but there's still some they're probably running independently. Sometimes it's because maybe it's sort of maybe it could be high risk area, or it's a sort of they need a different speeds, or whether sometimes for whatever reason, yes, they need to, or it could be a budget, they need to run separately. So you have this hybrid model, and also you have this totally centralized model where you have your platform, your support, everything all centralized in one team. So there's a pros and cons. I mean, among all these models, it doesn't mean okay, it's one of the other, or this maturity, the left to the right is more matured. I would say for every organization, it just pick the one that fits for what you need. And then I think, what I will say is usually, yes, I mean, the centralized approach, that usually also means you usually need more maturity to be able to manage it. So consider your own IT resource and also the risk that you willing to take, and whether you feel that currently you'll be able to manage the centralized approach. I think there's pros and cons that you could certainly have more efficiency in terms of engagement with your so utilize your resource all in one place, but also everything goes through the central place. Usually it could, sort of could take more time. And sometimes if you have already a centralized team running for probably months of years, you could have a lot of reusable resources. So your onboarding of new team could be faster. So I think based on what your projects need, what business objective you want to achieve, short-term, long-term, and then also when you are developing this engagement model, looking at, okay, where you are, which one fits you right now, and perhaps you can gradually, with that probably long view in mind, and then how you're going to move to a different level. So when you are, for example, first time outsourcing to integration vendors and building a new relationship, and also it's very common, you probably could start from a small project and then you start to build a relationship and then replicate the process to other projects, and then expand to the wider areas and improve more adoption in organizations. Maybe the last tip is, don't outsource your thinking. I think this one is probably, straightforward. What do I mean by that? Don't outsource your thinking. I think usually, I think several challenges. I think from what I saw in the past is sometimes we think, okay, we delegate everything, and then because each of the integration supplier, they have years of experience doing implementation. So we think, okay, we're in good hands, and they should be able to, do the job. And that's right. Yeah, don't get me wrong, but I think is where your business wanted to go, and what is good for you, and it's probably not necessarily the same what everyone else think. So I think be clear, like exactly what you want to achieve, what's really, really critical, important to you, and what sort of decision you need to make, and then that you shouldn't delegate. So because usually supplier, they would know this, also they know the technical level, certainly assuming, that's their course, but they don't know your business probably enough. And that's why earlier when I say in terms of try to frame your business context and also own your decisions, because all these things can be easily misinterpreted. For example, like I'll give you probably two scenarios. For example, when we talk about engagement model, usually probably the consultancy or consultants, they're coming in, they will lay out the best practice or how we should set up probably the center of excellence. And they also how many roles, what sort of the steps you should go through, how you should structure your team. But usually they could, be quite complex. It's not necessarily it's suitable for every company. So if you don't know what exactly is important to you, whether it's what your short-term urgent goal or the business priority that you need to meet, then sometimes you could, be totally focused on setting the center of excellence, and then probably you realize actually it's going to take 6 months or 12 months, and to actually get it up and running or to start to deliver the value. But maybe your business at the time, they already felt that, okay, they haven't actually see a return. They probably start to feel like, okay, they need to cut the budget. So sometimes it's just keeping in mind in terms of what's actually is good enough, help you to achieve to your next level. And I think usually the best practice that coming from the consultant, I think they're good, but they are starting point. They're not necessarily the solution or the answer. And also a second example is sometimes we could say, hey, a company say, hey, let's build an API. We want it to be API first, and we're gonna to turn everything into an API from traditional point-to-point integration and turn everything into an API. But then when you outsource, we could possibly, the delivery team could focus on building a lot of API, but which API is actually used for your business, or are they working on the right set of API? And that's asked by the customers or asked by the business. So I think these are sometimes the decision in terms of what to build is very important, and that should be owned by the company or by the company itself. So to summarize what we covered today, 3 simple steps. First is how we're going to determine what to outsource, and then the second is framing the context. And the third is cultivating an effective engagement model. And you probably wouldn't get it right the first time. And it's a journey. And I think always, it will involve a little bit trial and error, to experiment and refine and tuning, optimizing that along the way. But I hope these steps will help you to simplify or how you think about outsourcing integrations, and also help you to minimize the risk possibly you could have when with the integration suppliers, and also help you to simplify your communication with the outsourcing suppliers. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jill. That was really exciting, and of course, a few learnings even for me, even though I've been in the business for 25 years now. Thanks for the insights and points. I was thinking that a couple of questions about your presentation and in your experience. What are the sort of the characteristics that I should look into when I'm choosing a outsourcing partner with regards of integrations, and what are the things that I in your opinion are important when choosing a partner?
Yes, okay. Yeah, I get asked about these questions quite a lot, and also personally, I work with many other integration vendors, and I think usually, of course, the first is the technical expertise. Whether they have the team, they have the experience, validate that in terms of and then speak to maybe the past clients that they served. I think to get a bit insight, I think that you always help to do some sort of check. And I think the other second part is how do you want to use the resource? I think sometimes it's not just about outsourcing, because sometimes you were thinking probably, okay, maybe you have a team, because it could be you wanted to sort of build out also your internal capability or your internal knowledge on certain things. And then when working with that third-party vendors, how flexible they can be working with you and how they can help to add that probably external experience probably into your teams, and that fill in the gap where you wanted to fill. And I think that's probably it's a area where I feel it's very valuable, but probably usually underdressed, because you could have all these skills and then experience like coming like building the delivery team, building this delivery in the process. But sometimes, you know, the best practice or that knowledge sharing, I mean, because when the delivery team, when they left, but you want to have probably that knowledge still in-house. And then I think sometimes be able to retain this knowledge, because onboarding and the offboarding like team, especially integration, sometimes when business going through the cycles where they suddenly need a huge resource to implement, or sometimes when maybe economy is not good, they need to cut the resource. But you know, we know the onboarding effort is not small. Retraining people, and then also have those people with years probably of knowledge about the business or the platform environment you built. So I think it's like understanding how we can keep this knowledge in-house or ensure that we don't lose it, and then also that vendor is flexible, that be able to work with you. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Maybe as a kind of continuing from that, since you've been also working with different organizations, and in your experience, what are the typical challenges that companies face when they finally decide to outsource some of the integrations?
The challenge, I think it's probably referring back to my slide. I think the challenge is they probably usually these missed expectations, mismatched expectations. They probably think, okay, that's the result they're going to get, because I think integration, they always think, okay, is the vendor can deliver what exactly the customer asked. But sometimes customer not necessarily they understand the integration. So sometimes this is what they think they need. But when you start the project and then you realize, okay, or when the thing's been delivered, realize, okay, that's not what we need, but that's what they asked. So I think that's probably the really the common challenge or the biggest risk in my view. And I think be able to minimize that communication gap, and help the company who is on the the buyer side be able to communicate, knows how to frame the context for the third party, the integration vendors, and it's important. And also for the vendors who are experienced, and then be able to help the buyers to refine the requirement, refine what they need, because sometimes it's how we can dig deeper to find out exactly what's really important to the business.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes that means we might have to go a step further, because sometimes okay, this is probably extra. I think sometimes I think it depends on the contact window. I think this is another thing I observed, is because when they outsource, they think it's a technical. So they may have a technical person that manage that conversation. Hey, what we're going to outsource. But I think I find out it's useful that if you could also, sometimes invite others into that conversation, especially non-technical ones, from the representative from the business, and to get their perspective in terms of what is important for the integrations or the result, the outcome they wanted to see.
That's a really good advice, and it's easy to agree. That's what we also see quite a lot. And I think your table of integration and characteristics is a good kind of advice. You can start from there, then really defining what kind of characteristics you are looking for the integration, and match them with your capabilities also when choosing the vendors. Thanks, Jill. That's super helpful. When it comes to, it seems that the integration problem or challenges are still there out in the market. And in my opinion, we are just in the beginning of new era of enterprise integration in that sense, because digitalization, all of those things are there really driving the demand for integrations. And whereas ONEiO, we work as an integration service provider in IT services, IT sector. That's our home turf. And that's also where we started back in the day, because we also have the domain expertise. And I feel like then also when the customers are coming to us asking for help, they're exactly the business side of IT. They're looking for results, not the technical solution. They are having the business problem, and they have identified that there is a need for integration or integrations. It could be, from your characteristics table, we can easily pick when we integrate IT services. It's quite often technically quite complex. It's B2B. The responsibilities are a little bit unclear, and cost is considered high due to the fact that it's complex, and it's B2B, and responsibilities are unclear. And also, it's quite often mandated. So there is no way getting around it, that you need to really integrate these processes or workflows like this, because it's a customer-vendor relationship or vendor-subcontractor relationships that we are typically working in. And then, of course, I would say that the one of the things that customers are looking for, in addition, combining all of these, is that when it comes to these 4 different models that you explained, what are the things that you can outsource, it's a combination of all of these. And the reason is that it's outside everybody's core, but it's mandatory that you have to do.
Yeah.
So in that sense, sort of the outsourcing in IT services side of things, we have seen, and the customers are liking that it makes sense, and they can focus on a more business critical and core side of the integrations. I think that was it for this webinar, I'd guess. So thanks Jill for taking the time, and it was super important. I think it's a really timely topic as well. So thanks for joining us today. And
pleasure.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Thank you, Yuhat, and yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and also share some of the my experience and also the challenge I see in integrations, and hopefully, yes, we can try to minimize, be able to minimize the gaps in this outsourcing integration gap, and hopefully there's more successful projects that possibly every company can deliver. Thank you, everyone.